Hello! So today we are going to talk about 10 books that are really hyped lately, that have been really hyped lately, and we're going to talk about the ones that I have read, and if I recommend them, if I enjoyed them, give you a little bit of information so you can decide if you might like them. If you follow me, it's probably because we have similar tastes or some reason. Hopefully. I've seen a couple other people do this recently, and I just think it's a really good idea. It's kind of like a specialized, okay, for the person you follow, what did they think about the books that are really being pushed right now? So I'm gonna link the people that I saw do this that inspired me to do it. Go check them out for sure. But I asked y'all, what books are you seeing pushed right now? And then I sifted through your answers, picked the ones that I've read that I can tell you my opinion on, and we're gonna talk about it. So, first of all, Fourth Wing was like almost every answer. It was well over 50%. Do I need to read Fourth Wing? Am I missing something? I mean, obviously I've seen Fourth Wing everywhere as well, but I looked into it. It didn't look like something I would like. I moved on with my life. But y'all are convincing me that I should read it. Not because you said it's good, but like, am I missing something? I'm like 75% sure that I won't like it, but I mean, should I read it? We can suffer together. I can go through this. I could do a dedicated vlog reading through this book and we could suffer together, or I could be proven wrong and it could actually really surprise me. But also, I don't know if my audience would be interested in this book because it's so far from what I think I would be interested in. So maybe it's just that the hype is really bloated. You tell me. Do you want me to do this to myself? Anyway, getting that spiral out of the way at the beginning of the video, let's talk about 10 books that y'all said you're seeing everywhere this year, and I'll tell you, of the ones that I've read, if it worked for me or not. Maybe give you a little bit more information about them. First of all, excitedly, something that came up a lot is the Dandelion Dynasty. The first book being The Grace of Kings. This is by Ken Liu, and oh my goodness, this is worth the hype. I've read the first 2 books this year. I've ordered book 3. I'm waiting for it to come in the mail, and when it does, I will devote my life to it until it's done because oh my goodness, this is already one of my new favorite series. I won't put it on a new favorite series list because I'm not gonna make another list until after I've finished the quartet, but it's already there. So the Dandelion Dynasty follows a kingdom, or rather a collection of islands that have been conquered and are now they're now united under one banner. And with that conquering that's happened, also a lot of their own culture and language and traditions have been stripped of them. Now, the new emperor, this is all at the beginning of the book, the new emperor has died, and a lot of the people that are in these island countries remember what it was like when they had their own freedom. So a rebellion ensues. They want their kingdom back. And this follows multiple people throughout this rebellion and the different roles they play, the different positions of power that they gain and how that changes them and how that changes their relationships and how they get swept away in certain things and how they rise up in certain ways. It's amazing. And Ken Liu is a short story author, and the first book reads like one overarching story told in a lot of snippets. You can tell that he was a short story author first. But Wall of Storms, book 2, is impeccable. So if you enjoyed the story of book 1, but the writing style was really hard for you to mesh with, please read book 2. I mean, I loved book 1, so I'm biased, but book 2 blew me out of the water, maybe my favorite book of the year. It might be my favorite book of the year. So far. Is it gonna get, it's so good. Anyway, is the Dandelion Dynasty worth the hype? I haven't read all 4 books yet, but I will by the end of the year, and yes. Next up is Legends and Lattes. This came up several times because there have been Kickstarters coming out with special editions, and so even though this book was published a year or 2 ago, it's still kind of being talked about a lot and still on a lot of people's radars right now. And funny enough, Wraithmarked is the sponsor of this video. Wraithmarked is doing a Legends and Lattes deluxe hardcover, and it looks incredible. They have a custom dust jacket with original art, embossing, and glossing. They have a cloth-bound case that's featuring additional art, gold-gilded edge pages, ribbon bookmarks, colored end sheets, custom interior design, and illustration. Honestly, it all looks so good, and I've read the book. These illustrations match the story so well. I've already ordered my copy. I can't wait to get my hands on it because it looks incredible. So be sure to check out the Kickstarter if you're interested in the deluxe edition. The link is in the description of this video. Now, Legends and Lattes, the book. Is it good? Honestly, this one really surprised me. Yeah, it is. So cozy fantasy and fantasy stories where it's really more about just how good it makes you feel instead of really the plot. These books are a miss for me 90% of the time. I've tried a few that have been really popular over the last few years and I just don't tend to, it's just not my thing. But Legends and Lattes was something different. It was something that had that extra bit of charm that really got me. We had a stream on my Patreon after we finished reading it because it was a buddy read, and I was asking people in the stream, I was like, what is it about this book? Because there's so many things that shouldn't have worked for me, but somehow it all did. It was so lovely to read. So like, what was it that this book did differently than the other books like it? If you don't already know, it's a fantasy setting, fantasy creatures, opening a coffee shop, working together, different people chiming in to do some of the serving or the baking or to help with some handiwork around the place. And really, it's just a cozy coffee shop story about characters that are working together and developing these relationships among them. And it's so charming, and I can't describe why. But surprisingly, I really enjoyed this one. I shouldn't have, but I did. Next up, one that came up a lot was Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. So this one is a tricky one because I enjoyed it. There are a lot of people that are having a lot of mixed feelings about it. It's definitely it's one that I've seen discussed a lot, and it seems to be something that people either love or really, really hate. And honestly, I think that it's all fair. In fact, most of the criticisms that I see about it are things that I listed as well when I talked about it in the New York Times vlog, I think it was. It's just that the things that worked for it worked really well, and the things that didn't work, I was able to kind of forgive because I really liked what did work for it. But yeah, this is one that's getting really mixed reviews. I enjoyed it. So this follows an author who is she's not seeing a lot of success in her career. However, a acquaintance, not really friend, that she went to school with, that she knew and has kept up with, has soared the charts. She's done amazing. Because of some circumstances, the author that was doing incredible died, and the author that was not so much happened to be there at the time and swiped the manuscript and polished it a lot. Put a lot of work into it, but it still wasn't hers, and she published it under her name. For me, this book felt so real. It felt like drama, real life drama unfolding in real time. I compared it to The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, even though it's a totally different story. That kind of feeling of like, am I reading a real life story and everything is a mess and no one is really good necessarily in the book? Like nobody's making good decisions, but you're just watching the car crash happen. That's how I felt about Yellowface. This is actually the only R.F. Kuang book that I've read, so there are some criticisms going on about this book about it being reflective of previous works of hers or something like that, and I can't comment on that because I haven't read her other works. But to this day, my favorite review that I've seen for this book is the same one that I recommended in my New York Times vlog. I'll have it linked again in the description of this video because I just think it summed up so much of the weird, if you're not in the book community, how will you receive this book? But if you are in the book community, you recognize all the nods. Or rather, I should say, if you're not in the very online book community. Anyway, this is one that's gotten a lot of mixed reviews. I personally enjoyed it. It wasn't a new favorite, but I read it in 2 days and couldn't put it down. Okay, next up, one that a lot of people recommended is actually, or mentioned in the post, is actually 4 or 3, depending on how you look at it, and that's the Sanderson Secret Projects. And boy, is that true. These books have kind of taken over BookTube. It's like the world pauses when a new secret project releases and everybody is talking about it for like 2 seconds, and then we all just kind of go back to our regular programming. And I've been a part of that, and it's been really fun. I've enjoyed that community aspect of a book drops, we all go for it, we all run. So 3 of these books have been released so far. I very, very much enjoyed 2 out of the 3. Tress of the Emerald Sea is an adventure following a girl who lives in a very comfortable, normal, boring life, and she's happy with it, but then the boy that she loves is in danger and she has to go on an adventure to try to save him, found family, It's a good time. It was very unique. I loved this book. Then there was A Frugal Wizard's Handbook to Surviving Medieval England. I didn't like this. It was very lit RPG or isekai, I think is how it's pronounced. I haven't actually read any isekai, but a lot of people were saying that that's what it was like. Just generally, this one just, very few things landed for me. I didn't hate it, but it's not one that I'm really going to talk about unless it comes up, like in this context. But I'm not going to bring it up. And then the third one is Yumi and the Nightmare Walker. This is two separate worlds, one in a very rigid, structured, traditional sort of expectations that Yumi has been selected for and doesn't really have a choice for, and then the other is a world of where there's nightmares that show up and feed off of people, and Painter's job is to try to keep them at bay with his art. And it's a book of art. It's a book about art, appreciating art. The story is formed around art, and it's really beautiful. I really enjoyed this one too. It was very different for Sanderson, and it worked really well for me. Okay, next up, a couple people brought up The Happy Place. This one didn't work for me. So, okay, disclaimer, I'm not a romance reader. I don't read a lot of romance. What I do read, I have a hard time connecting. Not that I never do. There are some romance books that I've loved, but I haven't figured out what my taste in romance is yet. Emily Henry is an author that I've read 2 of her books previous to The Happy Place. I really enjoyed both of them, so I was like, Emily Henry, let's go. A new release for her. And it didn't work out for me. I really, really, really wanted to love it, but heavily leaned on miscommunication. It's a friend group that's really just outgrown each other or is in a stage of life where they're not working together anymore, and some of them are trying to force it. It's pretty toxic. I really hated it. Like, I actively disliked this book. A lot of people did like it though, so, check it out for yourself. But man, this one was a big ol' miss for me. Amina Al-Sarafi, a couple people mentioned this as one that exploded. Everybody talked about it, and then now people don't really talk about it so much. So I read this at the time where everybody was saying, Amina Al-Sarafi, this is the one. This is the book of the year. And so I picked it up too because it sounded like, hey, maybe this is, nautical, pirates, let's go. I felt pretty middle of the road with this book. I liked elements of it. I didn't like other elements of it. We're following a pirate queen who is 40 years old. She's out of the game. She's living her normal domestic life, but it's not very prosperous. She definitely is not financially secure. And then she gets blackmailed into getting back in the game, essentially tries to get a couple of her old crewmates back together, tries to do this one last job that should make her financially secure. Doesn't go exactly as planned. It's an adventure. It should have worked for me. There were just a lot of little things that didn't work for me. It's like if one or two of these things didn't work out, then no problem. But there were a lot of little things that just kind of knocked it back to kind of being, yeah, it was good. I read it fast. I really enjoyed it. I had a great time. I didn't want to put it down, but I also don't really think about it now that I'm done with it. I've read a lot of pirate books though, and there have definitely been some that I've been like, oh, over the moon. I loved this so much. And yeah, this one just wasn't right for me. The Wager. This is a nonfiction that was on the New York Times bestseller list as well. I read it at the same time as The Happy Place. Oh, I loved it. Nonfiction about a shipwreck where they shipwreck in Brazil and they try to survive. It really doesn't go well for them for a long time, mostly because I think it's largely because they had a leader who was not decisive, and it caused them to twiddle their thumbs for way too long. Anyway, they end up splitting up. Some of them go north, some go south. The first group of people wash up and they're applauded. Congratulations, your ingenuity, your survival skills, incredible. And then the next group wash up and they say, mutineers, liars, you left us to die. And so then the British Empire is like, all right, so who do we behead? Who betrayed who? And the truth is that their stories are completely at war with one another. They have opposite ideas or stories about what happened, and so this is their two warring stories. The first third is slow, but once you get to the shipwreck, my goodness, I couldn't put the book down. I loved it. This book was incredible. Did it make it into my top books of the year? Impossible to know, but I loved it. So far. Top books so far. We're not done with the year yet. Next up, Red Rising came up a few times, probably because a new Red Rising book was released this year. This series is one, I didn't like Red Rising, the first book. I did enjoy books 2 and 3 in the original trilogy, but I didn't continue on to the next trilogy, mostly because I came out of the first trilogy saying, that was good. I'm glad I read it, but I wasn't over the moon about it. And so many people are over the moon about the series that I don't know. I don't want to be the downer that's like, yeah, it's good. While everybody else is like, this is amazing. Like, just, I don't know. I don't like being that person. Plus I had other books that I wanted to read, so I didn't continue on. I didn't read the newest thing, but that is my opinion on the original trilogy. I didn't like book 1, but I do think that books 2 and 3 are worth continuing on with. The series definitely improves as it goes on, and there's a lot to love about it, and I understand why so many people like it. I'm kind of like, yeah, solid. But I don't really bring it up very much. Another one that surprised me to see several people bring up was Jade City, the Jade trilogy. I think, did Jade Legacy come out this year? Is that why people are talking about it? This is another one that it wasn't my series. Jade War, I felt pretty middle of the road on until the end of it, and then the end convinced me, okay, I'm excited. Let's go on to book 2. And I came out of Jade City positive on it because I was so excited about that ending. And then I read Jade War and I was in the middle again where I was like, yeah, this is doing a lot of things really well, but it's just not connecting for me like it is for so many people. So I didn't continue on with Jade Legacy. I don't even know when it was published, obviously. But this is a mafia-esque style fantasy, also modern fantasy. It does a lot different. There's a lot about this trilogy that's very different from standard fantasy that we typically are drawn to, and I understand why it was something fresh and exciting for a lot of people, especially because it does do a lot of things really well. It didn't hit it for me. Okay, I'm ending this video with 2 that were not brought up very much at all, but they are new releases that were on the New York Times bestseller. They both were, and I read them both, so we'll talk about them too. You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight, which is a young adult thriller. A girl who has a summer job at what is essentially a night of horror game. You participate doing a horror simulation where like there's staff that are playing the part of a murder of a middle of the night, you're at a campground and there's someone trying to kill everyone and you try to be the final girl or the last ones. You try to survive the night. There is so much about this book that was written so well. The suspense, the moments of actual horror and gore were chilling. And just the general premise and setup of it was, so good. But again, I have mixed feelings about it because also for the antagonistic force, to me, it felt very Scooby-Doo. It was like a man wearing a monster mask chasing you through the hallway, which is not the exact scenario of what happened. That's a Scooby-Doo scenario, but if you've read it, you know why I say that, probably. And I hated the epilogue. So those 2 things brought it down for me, but it was still a positive experience reading the book. And then Warrior Girl Unearthed. I loved this book. This is another YA, but I would highly recommend it for a more mature young adult audience. Again, check out the New York Times video if you want the reasons why, because I list off the more mature topics that are kind of delved into that would maybe work better for someone who's a little bit more mature, but you know the teens in your life better than I do. Anyway, I loved this book. Our main character has to get a summer job to pay for, she got into a car accident, she has to pay for car repairs, so she has to do this summer job, and she works at a museum on the reservation. And in that job, she learns about some grave robbing that's happened and some of their culture that's been stolen and defiled, and she wants justice. She wants to be able to get those artifacts back, but there's a lot of reasons why she can't follow the system to do it, and so she kind of tries to go around the system to do it herself with her friends. Okay, those were the 10 books that y'all mentioned that I've read. There were books on that you guys mentioned having heard a lot about that I haven't read, so I couldn't talk about, but books that you've heard mentioned a lot, that I've read, those are my thoughts on them. That's a little bit more information on them. Let me know if you plan to pick any of them up or if this helped you decide, no, I will pass on that one. Thank you again to Wraithmarked for sponsoring this video, and don't forget to check out the Kickstarter if you're interested. The deluxe edition looks gorgeous, and supporting projects like this means that more special editions can be made. Link in the description if you're interested in checking it out. I post videos every Monday and Friday on this channel, Tuesdays and Thursdays on my review channel, which is always linked in the description. I'll see you again soon. Bye.